clap till you know if I got this microphone right. Is it working? Can you hear me? All right. This thing is... Have you ever been so tired you're full of energy? Sounds like a contradiction, but you know, you're just... You've kind of been doing a lot, but you're still excited about something, and it's always exciting to get to teach the Word. Anita and I were at a music educators convention this week, and beautiful music, and some of it very emotional. It's interesting how emotions can draw your energy from you. You know, I even shed a few tears at some of what I heard. The best choirs of the public education, colleges, public schools, whatever, in the state of Missouri were there, and it was just a pleasure and a gift of God, I'd say, to be there. So, if I seem a little loopy this morning, I may still be feeling a little emotional from the time. But we're in Judges, starting chapter 12, at the first verse, verses 1 through 7. And I'm going to come right out and say before I read this that what I'm going to bring out today, what's really stood out for me in this passage, is the perils of people group pride. People group, you can substitute any word you want in there: ethnic, racial, national, citizen, culture, chiefs. Anyway, you know, it's Deacon's fault. His influence on me, you know, he's making me think that way sometimes. No, but seriously, I think you all know what I mean. So let's start at Judges chapter 12. I'll read the verses here. Jephthah, as you know, has just won an amazing victory by the power of God over the Ammonites. And now along comes Ephraim. In verse 1 it starts out, "Then the men of Ephraim were summoned, and they crossed to Zaphon and said to Jephthah, 'Why did you cross over to fight against the sons of Ammon without calling us to go with you? We will burn your house down on you.' Jephthah said to them, 'I and my people were at great strife with the sons of Ammon. When I called you, you did not deliver me from their hand. When I saw that you would not deliver me, I took my life in my hands and crossed over against the sons of Ammon, and the Lord gave them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me?' Then Jephthah gathered all the men of Gilead and fought Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim, because they said, 'You are fugitives of Ephraim, O Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and in the midst of Manasseh.' The Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan opposite Ephraim. And it happened when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, 'Let me cross over,' the men of Gilead would say to them, 'Are you an Ephraimite?' If he said no, then they would say to him, 'Say now, Shibboleth.' But he said, 'Sibboleth,' for he could not pronounce it correctly. Then they seized him and slew him at the fords of the Jordan. Thus there fell at that time 42,000 of Ephraim. Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gileadite died and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead." Forgive me, okay? Ephraim is the Hebrew pronunciation, and when I'm working with it, I do that, and then I get up here. So Ephraim or Ephraim, they're the same thing, and I'll stumble over them. Just know that that's what I'm talking about, trying to anyway, okay? So as we continue the story of Jephthah, which started in chapter 10 through 11, this account, to me, is primarily, though, emphasizing Ephraim. Okay? And most of us know, and I'll talk more about this a little later, Ephraim and Manasseh were sons of Joseph, who was the son of Jacob. And he was the one that was sold by his brothers into slavery. And literally went from the pit to the palace. From a prison, God raised him up to be second in command, second only to Pharaoh in all of Egypt. And Ephraim and Manasseh were his sons that he had by the Egyptian wife he had. And so we have Ephraim here First of all, they were summoned, and this word is a word of emergency. Okay? It's a word to cry out and call for help. It's like an alarm bell ringing. Okay? It conveys a sense of urgency and desperation, often associated with prayer or a plea for divine intervention. It can also show how close the community is because there's immediate spread of this word, urgency and desperation. Okay? And also, this is not the first time Ephraim's done this in the book of Judges. If you remember back in chapter 8, Gideon had won a magnificent victory over Midian. And the Ephraimites come along and say, "What is this thing you've done to us, not calling us when you went to fight against Midian?" And they contended with him, that is Gideon, vigorously. "Hey, why did you leave us out of this?" The same thing they're doing. Only before, if you recall, and it's there in the passage, Gideon was able to sweet talk the Ephraimites out of anything rash, out of any kind of violence. Okay? This is, "What have I done in comparison to you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer?" Okay? God's given leaders of Midian, Oreb, and Zeb into your hands. This is reading from verses 2 and 3 of chapter 8. "And what was I able to do in comparison to you?" Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that. Kind of petted their egos a little bit. Okay? But there's a problem there. It's showing there's a problem there with Ephraim. And now this problem hasn't gone away. Only this time it's even worse. They're not even talking. They're just saying, "We will burn your house down on you." Them's fighting words. Okay? And we'll see here, I'll give it away right now, that the emergency that Ephraim was reacting to was their pride was hurt. I think from this passage we can see that this is why this is an outgrowth of people group pride. Now, I'm going to get to this, okay? A certain level of pride in oneself and one's group is not automatically wrong. Okay? There's a point. And I think it's kind of a Western thing. Most of the time in the Old Testament, when you read about pride, it's not a good thing. Okay? And I'll expand on that more later. Okay? And so, even though they'd been attacked by Amnon, okay, but some details here to get a sense of the history, Ephraim had been called, apparently. It's because it says here in verse 2, Jephthah said to them, "I and my people were at great strife with the sons of Ammon. When I called you, you did not deliver me from their hand. You didn't do anything. You didn't respond." Now, we don't have that anywhere else in the narration, but apparently this happened at the time that Gilead was chosen to be the leader of Israel against Ammon. And looks like Ephraim just didn't show up. And now they got the nerve to come and say, "Well, why didn't you ask us?" Okay? "I did. I called you," Jephthah says. All right? And so, it's also, we know from the passage that the Gileadites suffered more from Ammon than Ephraim. As it says in, if you look back at chapter 10, verse 9, "The sons of Ammon crossed Jordan to fight against Judah, Benjamin, and the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was greatly distressed." Yet apparently, Ephraim was able to fight them off, at least locally. And Gilead, on the other hand, was occupied. Okay? So, even though Ephraim managed to fight off Ammon, they didn't care much about the suffering of them Gileadites. A little more pride, a little more sense of superiority showing up there. Okay? So Jephthah's not, he's not exaggerating when he says, "I and my people were at great strife." Very great strife. They were occupied, okay? And you didn't. It's very specific here. It's in the grammar of the wording, okay? He's looking at them, pointing a finger. "You did not deliver me from their hand." You know? Especially when I asked you for help. All right? And so we come to verse 3. "When I saw that you would not deliver me," so obviously somewhere along the line here, Jephthah realized Ephraim's not coming. Not going to wait for them. Okay? I took my life in my hands and crossed over against the sons of Ammon, and the Lord gave them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me? And deliver, same things before, save, deliver, rescue me. And I took my life in my hands by my own power without any help from you, in a manner of speaking. Though I like this here, Jephthah's got a balance. I took my life in my own hands, and the Lord gave them into my hand. Jephthah made the effort. He went after him. Okay? But he recognizes that the Lord gave them to me. Okay? There's that balance, between our effort and the sovereignty of God. And I don't know where to put the fulcrum, by the way. I don't know where to draw the line, but there it is. We're still expected to work. Okay? Okay. So, and then we come on to verse 4, moving pretty quickly here. Then Jephthah gathered all the men of Gilead and fought Ephraim, and the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim. Because they said, that is, the Ephraimites said this, you are fugitives of Ephraim, O Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and in the midst of Manasseh. Okay. This is a put down. I think you can see that. This word fugitives can also mean a refugee, an escapee, like someone who got out of prison. Okay. Someone that doesn't belong there. Okay. Ephraim, the Gileadites lived within the area of Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay. And they weren't one of the sons, Judah, Simeon, Dan, etc. They weren't one of those. They were descendants, but they kind of had their own separate group now. But since they weren't one of the 12 tribes, including the half tribe, by the way, Ephraim and Manasseh here are half tribes, right? So the Ephraimites are putting them down, says, you don't count. You're not as important, okay, in the land and in the scheme of things here. So the epithet of fugitive shows a sense of superiority Ephraim had over Gilead. It's like they're saying, we deserve the glory. Who are you, some upstart that goes and defeats these guys? We should be doing that. There's also some jealousy there. Okay? I won't go on to jealousy, but it has been said, and I agree, you've probably heard that pride and jealousy are two sides of the same coin. Okay? Jealousy carries with it the idea of envy, coveting, as you know, I want this for myself. You shouldn't have it. And it starts with pride, often starts with pride. I think I'm the one who should have this. And so this is what you've got with the Ephraimites, I would say here. Okay? And they didn't think, as I already pointed out, that it was important to make an effort to defend an unimportant people group, as if there is such a thing. And there's another thing here, too, that you've probably seen this before in your own dealings with people, how irrational pride can make you. The facts don't matter. Okay? How was it Jephthah's fault that Ephraim didn't take the opportunity they were given to get the glory of defeating Ammon? It's kind of a mouthful there, okay? But Ephraim, you were invited to do this, and now you didn't come, and now you're blaming me? Where's the rationality in that? Pride will do that. Pride will bring that out. I'm sure some of you have experienced this before, right? You don't want to hear the facts. Not that any of us have ever done it, right? So I want to stop here and talk a little bit before we go on with the rest of it about pride and what it is. First of all, I got to warn you, there are 11 words in Hebrew language for pride, and I did not look at every single one of them. And if I did, we'd be here a lot longer. It could be a couple of sermons into itself, okay? But as we understand pride, I think especially in our Western culture, we need to examine some things. First of all, pride can be a feeling of self-respect and self-worth. And that's not wrong. There should be, in a healthy human being, a certain level of, self-worth, self-respect. Okay? Now, of course, can that be taken too far? Yes, quite can. Okay. For me, the starting point of self-respect is that you are in the image of God. If you are a human being, you are in the image of God. And that sets you above a lot of things in creation, above everything in creation. And God didn't die for the angels even, which you could argue they're in the image of God, but he died for humans. Okay? There's a basis for your worth. Okay? And I don't think that that's pride to recognize that you are worth something. Okay? Another type of pride is satisfaction with you or another's achievements. Okay? Something you built, something you accomplished, something your son or daughter did, you can be proud of. I don't think that this is a pride that's a sin either, though, again, you can take it too far. I think the mark for a believer in pride and achievement for your kid or for yourself is when you thank God for it. Because who gave you that brain, that mind, the skill in your hands or your singing or whatever it is that you've achieved? Who gave that to you? Who made that possible? Believer, yes, feel good, feel satisfied. Okay, maybe have some pride in what you achieved, but recognize who made the achievement possible. I think that's you can put a line there, that's when it crosses over. So when you start, if you don't do that, then you start really thinking more of yourself. Okay? I saw a little of that at this music convention this week. Didn't need to praise them, they were full of praise for themselves. So very, very, very few, okay? That was not an overarching characteristic at this. I want to be careful, okay? But another kind of pride is the trait, this is how this is put here, the trait of being spurred on by dislike of falling below your standards. Again, this one's got its problems too. Do you take pride in the job you do for the glory of God? Okay. I've been in the construction trades some years ago, and you got guys there that really, especially some of these older guys, that really, it's a work of art what they create, whether they're putting a concrete wall, putting in flooring, building a house, things they do with their hands, and you got some guys like just slap it together, get the money and get out of there. But you got other guys that they go to the extra mile. No, they've got some pride in their work. I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's a wrong kind of pride. There's a certain level you won't go below, okay? Now, at the same time, if you're hungry and you need work, don't be too proud to dig ditches. If it's honorable work and you're going to get your hands dirty, okay, don't be too proud to do that. On a farm upstate New York, this was a great example of being willing to work. Talk about a stinky job. How many of you have been in a barn with cows? And maybe you don't know, the gutter system, where the cows relieve themselves, is, it's back there just behind. It's a gutter, and it's got these metal blades hooked up to a chain. Of course, today it may be a more modern thing, I don't know, and you turn it on the end of the day after you've milked the cows or anything, and it moves all the manure and stuff around and up a chute and into the manure spreader. You know about manure spreaders, right? Okay, that's the device that you go out in the field and fertilize the field with it. It spreads it all for you, okay? So, well, one winter, that thing broke in our barn. And there was no way to move the manure. And, well, after a week of putting lime and straw on it, at the end of the week, my dad hooked up the manure spreader to the tractor, and pulled it into the barn, and literally with shovel and pitchfork and scraper, shoveled a barn full of manure into that manure spreader. I was there to help him. I was handling tools. I was 6 or 7 years old. Put it all in a manure spreader and took it out later. He had to do it one more time. He was not too proud. In fact, perhaps it could be said there was pride in his work there. Okay? Maybe that's an extreme example, and maybe I'm making some of you thankful that you're urban types now, but that's my father's example comes to me often when I think of pride and his willingness to do any work to take care of his family. Okay? There is a point at which some things are below you, but there are some things that aren't. Okay? And again, sometimes it's this question of pride versus obedience. Sometimes, for example, I've talked about, how guys in the military thought I should participate in some of the things they did. I never thought of it in terms of pride, but I always thought of it in terms of obedience. Okay? That can be tied in too as well. Your pride in the Lord, boasting in the Lord by your actions. All right, go on here. Okay. Now, the last one here that is the one that we worry about the most. This is an unreasonable self-esteem. Unreasonable or inordinate, overbearing self-esteem. You think more highly of yourself than you should. And this is mostly the pride that we need to worry about when we are dealing with things of the Lord, when we're just dealing with our life, as I've said. Now, any of these other examples of pride that I gave you were, you can carry all of them too far. But like I said, certain sense of self-respect, self-worth, that's reasonable. Satisfaction with your achievement or others, believer as long as you give thanks to God. I like how Patrick Mahomes stands up at the end of a game they've won and thanks God for it. I like that. Okay. Now there is another kind of pride, but I didn't have time to put a picture of them up. Those big cats they got in Africa. I'll tell you what, if you ran into one of those, that kind of pride, that could be a very humbling experience. Okay. So if we think about pride this way, okay, it's just to sum it up, don't exalt yourself, okay? Especially if you're a believer, your life is about exalting God. In whatever way he's called you to, in whatever people group he's assigned you to, okay? And if we look at Ephraim here, we can see kind of a progression. Okay? We can only speculate on how much being sons of Joseph, who was second only to Pharaoh, may have sparked pride in Ephraim. Talked about this before, okay, at the beginning. Here you had Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, and they were called half-tribes, by the way. And Joseph was probably could spend a long time talking about his struggles with pride and humiliation and humbleness as well. Okay, as I said, from the pit to the palace, from prison to the palace he went. And I think that it's reasonable to assume that Ephraim took some pride in how this Joseph, becoming the second in power only to Pharaoh, in a way almost single-handedly saved Israel. When he wisely had all the food put away from the famine, right? The big famine came, and then Israel was able to come into Egypt and find safety and food, okay, and survive and live, okay? Yeah, Joseph, our forefather Joseph, yeah, he was an important guy. And so you come to Joshua 17, if anybody wants to turn there, Joshua 17, verses 14 through 19. The sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, spoke to Joshua. This is when they're allotting the land, apparently, in the context. Dan, you go here. Simeon, you go there. Judah, you get this. Where each of the sons of Issachar will be in this section. And apparently, Ephraim and Manasseh had a little problem, because here in verse 14 of Joshua 17, starting in verse 14, then the sons of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, "Why have you given me only one lot and one portion for an inheritance, since I am a numerous people whom the Lord has thus far blessed?" Okay. As it's been said, Joseph, you could say Joseph was the tribe, and Ephraim and Manasseh were the half-tribes as his sons. It's just how it worked out, without going into all the specifics. Okay. They're saying, wait a minute, you've only given us one lot and one portion for an inheritance. Now we got to split between the two of us, okay? And we're a numerous people. And the Lord has blessed us. And we got Joseph as our father, okay? And Joshua, I like how Joshua stands up to him, says, In verse 15, if you are a numerous people, go up to the forest and clear a place for yourself there in the land of the Perizzites and of the Rephaim, since the hill country of Ephraim is too narrow for you. So go up there and clear his land, do some work. The sons of Joseph said, the hill country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites who live in the valley land have chariots of iron, both those who are in Bethshean and its towns and those who are in the valley of Jezreel. And Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, you are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one lot only, but the hill country shall be yours. For though it is a forest, you shall clear it, and to its farthest borders it shall be yours. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, even though they have chariots of iron, though they are strong. Okay? Work for it. Okay? It seems that Ephraim and Manasseh are expressing some sense of entitlement here. Okay? That's not their place to ask for. Okay? I am a numerous people whom the Lord has blessed. So, you should be giving me more than I'm getting. A third point here on Ephraim's progression to sinful pride. Judges 8, we talked about this, I alluded to this earlier, when they confronted Gideon for not including them in the glory. And then Gideon sweet-talked them and calmed them down and made them feel better about themselves. I don't know, sometimes it's the right thing if, he stopped a fight, I guess. That's a good thing. But how much did he do about their pride? That could be debated, okay? And finally, we come to the beginning of this chapter where they say, why didn't you include us? We're going to burn your house down with you in it. You see the progression? You see what's happening here? I don't think I'm reading much into this. I think Ephraim has developed a people pride problem. Okay? Well, we go on in verse 5, now going back to the narrative. Just remembering verse 4, they're reacting to this insult, and they fought Ephraim. And so it says in verse 5, the Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan opposite Ephraim. And it happened when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, let me cross over, the men of Gilead would say to them, are you an Ephraimite? If he said no, verse 6, then they would say to him, say now Shibboleth. But he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it correctly. Then he seized him and slew him at the fords of the Jordan. Thus there fell at that time 42,000 of Ephraim. The fords were places along the river Jordan that were more easily passable. Whether they had bridges or anything like that, I'm not sure, but maybe it was more shallow there. The banks were closer together. It was easier. So the Gileadites gained, you could say, strategic military control. This would be a good move in a battle as it is. And they were there to stop Ephraimites from fleeing. To me, this is kind of a sign, by the way, maybe getting off a little bit, this is kind of a viciousness of the time. If they're defeated, why don't let them go home? Well, they weren't doing that. Okay. And so they had to say Shibboleth. The word literally means, depending on the context, it can be an ear of grain, or a stream or a flood. Okay. Depending on the context. All right, stream or flood. We're in a Bible study on Wednesday nights with Deacon leading, and one of the things that's coming out, that's being brought out in the study, is how the Bible is a work of literary art, and how its structure, there's meaning in structure, not just in what it says sentence by sentence, word by word, but how it's all put together. And that kind of alerted me to this word Shibboleth, when most commentators, and I don't disagree, the word Shibboleth was picked as a test because they knew that somebody from Ephraim couldn't say it right. But I think, too, that it was appropriate that they had to say Shibboleth because Ephraim, by their pride, had brought a flood of judgment upon themselves. So I think that the Lord is making a point here, okay, about that. And then here's another thing, 42,000 dead. Now, I don't think there were a million Ephraimites. I don't think they were that populous. 42,000 is not insignificant, and how that's going to affect them for a long time. A generation of men gone, most of a generation. Okay? And here's another thing too. Ephraim suffered a fate similar to that of immoral Canaanite idol worshippers. Right? Think about it in Judges. These idol worshippers, these Canaanites and others that had immoral worship practices for their gods, losing thousands, tens of thousands in battle against Israel. Now Ephraim's done that, but they haven't been like that kind of immoral worshipers. Could it be that pride at this level is just as bad as idol worship? Well, think about it. If you're that proud of yourself, you're probably worshiping yourself, right? Which can be the worst kind of idolatry. And I think some of you have been thinking about this and saying, probably, John, when are you going to bring this up? Yes, Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling. Okay. Two different words here, pride. Majesty, exaltation. Okay. It's an interesting word because if it's used of God, it's used in a positive way. Exaltation, majesty, lifted up. Okay. Whereas when it's referred in human contexts, it's a bad word. Okay. So this is the thing that belongs only to God. This level of pride, however you want to call it. We got no business possessing it. We got no business claiming it. Okay? And so, a haughty spirit, now this word haughty, which is translated pride sometimes, it emphasizes elevation, height, lifted up. Okay? Remember in Samuel, chapter 9 and 10 in there, the prophet Samuel was told to anoint Saul. What did it say about Saul in the passage? That he was really handsome and head and shoulders above everybody else. Okay? This word, this haughty, this was liked to be used, kings liked to use this. You know, there was this belief, and, we don't have this problem anymore. There's this belief that taller people are somehow just stronger and more able to lead and everything else, right? Right? We don't have that problem this day and age, do we? Okay. All right. So, just two kinds of prides here: the kind of pride of exaltation that only belongs to God, and then this lifting up of ourselves, thinking of ourselves more highly, that we shouldn't be doing. And so it closes here with Jephthah judging Israel for 6 years, and he died and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. Ephraim is an example of the perils of people group pride. You know, I think that if you remember how I showed here the progression, that they came to a point where they really thought they were deserving of more, of glory, than they really were. Okay, and again, you could pick your group, whatever you identify with. Okay. Take people group pride and emphasis, and take the word people group and put a different word there. Ethnic pride, racial pride, cultural pride, okay, national pride. Proud to be an American, yeah. Y'all know that song, right? Okay, you've all heard that, okay? Yeah. I understand the sentiment, but the song makes me cringe. Okay, that's all I'll say about it, okay? Hope I'm not offending anybody. But social class, okay? Who will you or will you not affiliate with? Okay? Based on the way they dress. I saw this a lot in middle school. You know, bothered me. I got in an argument once with a kid about school uniforms, and I says, yeah, well, it would probably let some of you have more friends because, face it, there's kids you guys don't associate with because they're not dressed right. Is that fair? Anyway, okay, sorry, I'm going off. Okay, social class. Pick your classification, okay? How about branch of the military, guys? Yeah, we never made fun of them or the services, did we? Okay? The Air Force putting down the Marines, who put down the Army, who put down the Navy, Airedales, grunts, squids, and jarheads, okay? Right? Okay, some of it was good-natured, okay, but, I've seen that. Guys in the branch service who really think, all the others are, some of that. I think, though, that we would do well to reflect on perhaps the worst modern example in our modern era, broadly speaking, of that of Germany. As most of you, I think, are aware, at the end of World War I, Germany was humiliated. And the Allied powers of Europe and America didn't help any. Not only were they defeated, we demanded economy-ruining reparations from them that they pay for certain damages and things. And you've probably heard this before. There was at one point in Germany where you needed a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread. That was not an exaggeration. Okay? Talk about inflation. Okay? And so, of course, a man like Adolf Hitler can come along and give them back their national pride. I often hear Nazi Germany criticized for hate, and yes, that's true, but before the hate came the pride. Read about it. They were desperate as a people to get back some national pride. And that was used to bring them to where they were a tool of a totalitarian dictator to do horrible and awful things. Now, while I'm saying that, I want to say fairly, always remember, there were German people who were opposed to Hitler. There were many German people who saw what was happening and tried to withstand it. Okay? Don't be prejudiced against the German people. And a few I've talked to in modern times, young people, they're not responsible for what happened. I told them what I told my boys. The only responsibility you have to the past is to learn from it. Okay? But if you weren't there doing it, okay, you weren't responsible, but learn from it. Okay? But I bring up Germany as an example of how far pride can take you, how far people group pride can take you. And it did it to Ephraim. Okay? Just remember this, okay? Ask yourself this question. In what do we find our identity? What do you find your identity in? Now, I stand before you as a man who's half Latino and half Caucasian. Father's side came from Germany, Austria. My mother came from Colombia, South America. Okay? I value that. It's been a lot of fun on my Hispanic side. Okay? And I've learned many things. And I like to tease Anita. Anita was raised in Brazil, right, as a missionary. I just can't seem to get away from these women from South America. I don't know what it is, but it's just, but am I proud of it? Well, what did I have to do with it? Okay? What did I have to do with being Latino or German or whatever? Okay? The Lord made me for a purpose the way I am, and I will value that, and if there's some self-respect, pride in that, okay, fine. But I'm not better than anybody else. I have advantages, but so does everybody else. Every one of you has advantages I don't have, by whatever your people group is. But more importantly, by what the Lord has done in your life. Okay? This is the foundation, I think, from preventing us from falling into the perils of people group pride. If anything, and we know this verse 2, Psalm 34:2 says, "My soul will make its boast in the Lord." Acts 17:26 says, "He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth." From one. Literally says one, as in Adam. Okay? We're all the same race. We're all the human race. Okay? And so if you're human, as I said before, you're in the image of God. That's your starting point. It makes you worthy of a level of self-respect. And love, don't forget, for God so loved the world. Okay. And finally, Revelation, Well, the printer didn't do very nice for me, but I believe it's 7:9. You know this passage too. After all these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could count, from every nation and all the tribes, peoples, and languages, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands. And they were crying out, and you know the passage, praising the Lord. Salvation to our God. Tribes, peoples, languages. Didn't matter what they were. Okay. And so, just to close it, as the praise group comes up and Deacon comes to lead us in communion. Someday I'd like to teach that to more extent, but in Luke 17, and I think that this is something I just want to leave on each of us personally, as a foundation to guard against excessive people group pride. A starting point, sometime look at Luke 17, chapter 17, verses 7 through 10. And this is the story of the servants, where Jesus says, which of you having a slave plowing or tending sheep will say to him when he has come in from the field, come and sit down and eat? No. And I'll abbreviate it. The servant comes in those times, say, no, you're going to wait on me and feed me, and after I'm taken care of and gone to bed, then you can take care of yourself and eat. Okay? He does not thank the slave because he did the things which he was commanded to do, does he? Jesus says here. So you too, when you do all the things which are commanded you, the achievements, the self-respect, after you do all the things which are commanded to, say, we are unworthy slaves. We have done only that which we ought to have done. Okay. As a group or as an individual.